Good day to you. Welcome to this session on the measurement of alterations. This is the exercise that we're going to do. This is the existing layout. This is the new layout. It involves the conversion of the storeroom and the reception area into a WC, a sales area, and a shop area. So that means we need to remove that wall. We need to build a new wall. We need to insert a new steel window. We need to remove those windows, building the opening solid. It involves a new Meranti entrance door in the existing frame. And it involves the replacing of the vinyl floor tiles and the carpet with ceramic tiles. We're not going to look at the conversion of the office into the storeroom. So if we look at the dimensions, firstly, we're going to look at the removal of the timber skirting from wall to be removed. We remove that wall. There's a skirting that side and a skirting that side as specified on the drawing. So the first item is the removal, take up and remove timber skirting from wall to be removed. It is on both sides of that wall. The length is 3.39, horizontal dimension, vertical dimension. So that is 3.39. And then we need to deduct the width of the door, which is 0.85. We also need to remove the rhino corners, which runs above the door. So it is just 2 times 3.39. It is take up and remove. It is not carefully take up and remove. The word carefully we only use when the item has to be reused or whether it's handed over to the employer. For example, in this case, we use carefully. If we look at the specification, we have a new door there, door opening in that wall there. If you look at the specification, it says there for this area is the same as for the shop. Now for the shop, it says there, it is an existing silk-core door and existing steel door frame. So that means that that door and frame is existing. So that door and steel frame there, we need to reuse in that position there. And that is the next description. Carefully, because we are going to reuse it. Take out from 110 millimeter wall to be removed. Set aside for reuse. The reuse is measured elsewhere. And we are setting aside the door and the steel frame. And we state the overall size in the description. That is measured in number, and there's 1. That reuse that we refer elsewhere measured is called for in the standard system. Reuse of existing components must be measured in number, and there's a description. Set up and build in position, existing door and steel frame in new brick wall. Please note for a new door and a new window, we do not need to measure that item. It is deemed to be included in the description of that window or that door frame. Have a look at the standard system. Then we measure, break down and remove that 110 millimeter wall. That wall that we need to break down now is the length of the wall times the height of that wall minus the area of the door. So it is 3.39 times 2.69. There's my side cast, floor to ceiling, 2,600 plus 1 course above ceiling, 2.69. And we deduct the area of the door. Now, where we remove that wall there, we might have damaged the brickwork in that position and the plaster in both those positions there. We need to measure, make good to brickwork and plaster, where 110 millimeter cross wall removed. It is measured in meters, and it is in those positions, the same height as the brickwork, 2.69 meters high. Now, where we have removed that wall there, we've got to make good the rhino gypsum ceiling and branding. Where 110 wall removed, it is the length of that wall, which is 3.39. We also need to make good to the concrete floor and the floor screed for a new floor finish. We've removed that wall and the door frame, so we must make good for the full length of that wall. Also, we need to make good to the skirting. That skirting, Marante skirting runs around the corner, and we've got to make good there. There's no wall anymore, so we need to fix that skirting. Make good to Marante skirting. We 110 wall removed. There's 2 of them. And similarly also for the rhino corners. We removed that wall. There's a gap now in the corners, and we need to fix that corners and the skirting. Next item, I've started removing the floor finishes. Firstly, the carpet. Take up and remove carpet and underfelt, and prepare screed for new floor covering or brick wall. So it is the area of the room, which is 3.8 times 6.89. The floor covering also goes into the floor, into the door opening there, and halfway in that position there. So that one there is the width of the door times the width of the wall. And for the outside, it is halfway of the thickness of the wall. Right, take note, take up and remove. If it's removed or handed over to the client, we do not say it is carefully. The toe vinyl floor tiles, we've got to remove that. It is the area of the room, 3.8 by 3.39. And also this floor covering goes into that door opening, 0.85 times 0.11. Now we want to start building the new wall. So we first have to cut 2 things and bond the brickwork to the existing. At that point there, bonding the new brickwork to the existing. It's measured in meters square. So it is the width of the wall times the vertical height of the brick wall, which is 2.69. Now we have to measure an item of cutting through the ceiling for that new wall that we've just measured. So it is cut through ceiling and branding for new 110 wall, and make good ceiling both sides. The corners we measure elsewhere. It is cutting along that length over the door opening, 3.39. We also need to cut through that corners there. The corners is going right through, but now we've got a wall there. So we need to cut through for the 110 wall. So there's a description. 2, 1 this side and 1 that side there. If we look at the timber skirting now, if I can just briefly go back to the corners. The corners is that red line. It runs that direction, it runs that direction, and it goes there. We only need to cut for the new wall, which we have described in this description. If we look at the skirting at the bottom, indicated with that brown line, it runs through, it runs through, it runs through. However, if we look at the specification in this area there, it says there's no skirtings in that area there. And the wall finishes are indicated as ceramic tiles, ceramic wall tiles. There's no skirting in the toilet, right? So what that means is that we have to remove part of that skirting. Now we need to remove it from that point from that point on the inside of the wall, because now we've got a wall there. So what that means, that red line is what we need to remove. So at firstly, we need to cut through that Meranti skirting, and there's the description. Cut through timber skirting for removal of part thereof, and the removal we're going to measure separately. So we need cut there, and we need to cut at the bottom, and there is that description for that. It is not the same as for the corners where this part still remains. And there's the description, take up and remove timber skirting from wall, and we need to make good the wall plaster, which we might have damaged there. It's measured in meters. So it is from that point, the inside of the wall to that side, both sides, and vertically. 1.31 times 2, there's the side cast, and vertically 3.39. Then the building of the new 110 millimeter brick wall is the length times the height, and we deduct the door opening. We also need to measure plaster on the brick walls, internal plaster to brick walls. It is 3.39 times 2.60. I did not plaster above ceiling level, and it is measured on both sides of the wall. There's paint on this side, ceramic tiles, which also need plaster backing on the brick wall. So it's on both sides, and we deduct the area of the door opening. On the one side, we need to measure paint, indicated that area over there. So it's internal PVA emulsion paint to plastered walls. It is the length of the wall, which is 3.39. Only to the top of the skirting, right? There's a skirting at the bottom to the top. So it is 2.6 minus the 69 millimeter, giving us 2.53. And then we deduct for the area, we deduct for the area of the door. Now we cannot deduct the full height of the door opening. We need only deduct to the top of the skirting. So 2050 minus the 69, 0.85 times 1.98. Next item now is the ceramic wall tiles in that area as specified. Ceramic wall and floor tiles, no skirting. So it is right down to the floor. There's the description, ceramic wall tiles to plastered walls. So it is all round. So firstly, we take horizontal 1.2 times 2.6, floor to ceiling times 2, that side, and then vertically 3.39 times 2.6 times 2. But now we have a door there, so we need to deduct the area of the door, 0.85 times 2.05, and we have a new window. Now we're coming back to the size of the window later on, but the area of the window I've taken as 1.3 by 1.3. So we have ceramic wall tiles to the walls, but if we look at this, we also need some tiling at the reveals of the opening, also at the head of the opening, and as the sill. You look at your bathroom, they take that ceramic wall tiles, if it's the full width of the wall, they take it all around the opening as well. So there's the description for that. Ditto, but in narrow widths, not exceeding 300 millimeter wide. Have a look at the standard system. It is measured in meters square in the tiling trade. So it's 1.3 times 2 times 2. So it is the sides as well as top and bottom. And the second dimension is the width, 270 minus 110 on the outside reveal, minus the thickness of the frame, 25, gives us 0.14. Now we need to insert a new window in that position as specified. There's a new steel window. So firstly, we need to form that opening. And there's the description. Break through 270mm wall 4 and form new opening for steel window 1300 by 1300 high, including building cavity solid and DPC at the reveals, forming reinforced brick lintel, which we need to query, the type of external sill, brick on edge external sill, and note the ceramic tile internal sill is elsewhere measured, as we've seen what we've done in the previous item. So we include that there so that the contractor know that he does not need to allow for an internal sill for this description. And then make good plaster on both sides as specified. The 1300 by 1300, we need to scale that. And if the drawing is not to scale, which in this case, it is not to scale, so we need to apply a factor to get the width of the window. And by now you should know how to calculate then the width of the window. In my case, 1300, and I've assumed that it is a square window, 1300 by 1300mm. And there's one opening to be formed for that new steel window. Then it also specified that there is a new Meranti entrance door in existing frame. So the frame remains. It is just the door that needs to be replaced. So take out and remove from timber door frame, a framed ledge braced and battened door, the size, which is the standard size of a door, and prepare that frame for the new door, which is elsewhere measured 813 by 2032mm. This is the size of the door, not the door and the frame, which is for an external door 950 by 2100. In this case, we refer to the door that needs to be removed and replaced. Then we also need to remove the two windows, and similarly the size of those two windows, the width is the same as that width there. So I've taken them as 1300, take out and remove from 270mm cavity wall steel window, and build up opening, including making good plaster on both sides and bonding new brickwork to existing. Where they close that opening with brickwork, they've got to bond the new brickwork to the existing brickwork. Remember, we always, unless it is specified that the item must be removed or whether it must be handed over to the employer, we always remove it. It will be specified if some item must be reused or handed over. And there are two of those windows that must be removed. Then I've started adding back my new floor finishes, which is ceramic floor tiles to floors. Firstly, in this area, 3.8 by 6.89 for the shop. Then the sales area, 2.6 times 3.39, that area. And there's the dimension for the calculation of the 2.6, the inside to the outside face of that wall. For the WC area, 1.2 times 3.39, we have two door openings, 0.85 times the width of the wall, and then the external one taken halfway into the door opening. Then we add back 19 by 69mm wrought Meranti skirting. That is on one side only, because on this side we've got ceramic floor tiles going right down to the bottom. So it is on one side only, and we deduct one side of the door only. And the varnish, which goes hand in hand with the Meranti skirting. The rhino cornice, that is on both sides of the wall. So that's why it is 2 times 3.39. Then we need to make a note of items still to be measured. And we call that a to take note. In other words, we are not going to measure that in detail in this exercise. For lecturing purposes, that was done in quantities 2. So we will still measure all those items as we've measured that in quantities 2, but not forming part as quantities 3. So that's why we just need to make a to take note. That means it is still to be measured. Similarly, for the WC and W wash hand basin and all the piping and traps, we just need to make a to take note of that. And then lastly, just a measuring note. The drawing specified that there is a new countertop, which is built on top of the floor tiles. So we do not need to deduct the area of the counter for the floor coverings. The counter is on top of the floor tiles. So there's no adjustment to be made to the ceramic floor tiles. It is going to be provided by the client and it's installed by the client. So for the bill of quantities, nothing needs to be done. We do not have to include anything in the bill of quantities or in the measurement. It is just a measuring note to say that we have taken note of that, but we don't need to measure anything for that counter provided and installed by the client. Right, and that is the end of this exercise. I hope you have enjoyed it and that you do understand it better now. Thank you and goodbye.